everybody, to another edition of the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And guys, we have another big football show for you today. Plenty of NFL topics on the docket, as well as some college football talk. Jared Smith, we are almost at the Cowboys' favorite holiday, Thanksgiving. Can you believe it? Like, this football season is running right past us as we sit here talking about it. And it's just crazy that we're this far into the season. Both our teams obviously super successful. We will talk a little bit about both of them today. We will also be talking about the Rams, the Chiefs, and the Carolina Panthers, because they have a new quarterback that a lot of people did not expect. And then, like I mentioned, not much changing in the college football rankings, so we won't be going over them live like we did last week, which was super fun, Jared. But we will discuss this week's slate of games, because there's a lot of college football playoff implications in some of the games this weekend. So that's what we'll be talking about today. But Jared Smith, let's start the podcast by going over the Los Angeles Rams, because they were obviously very newsworthy kind of right after we recorded our podcast last week, grabbing Odell Beckham Jr., and then we learned of the loss of Robert Woods. And then Monday night, they absolutely crap the bed, get blown out by the San Francisco 49ers, who have not shown much fight this season. And it's 2 weeks in a row where the Los Angeles Rams have not looked like a Super Bowl contender, even though they add Von Miller, they add Odell Beckham Jr. So, Jared, I want to get your thoughts to start this podcast on the Los Angeles Rams. What the hell is going on, man? Why is this team not performing, and why do they look like, the second best team in the NFC West?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, they do have two new, I guess, superstars or players that are of relevance to the league in Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. But guess what? It was their first game with the team, right? Von Miller has been with the team for 2 weeks, but did not play last week because he was dealing with an injury, I believe. And also, they just wanted to get him up to speed as far as the playbook went. They're not just going to throw him out there. And for Odell Beckham Jr., he had literally, I think, had one full practice with the team before playing on Monday night, right? Like, he's very lucky that the team had a Monday night game and it wasn't a Sunday game at 10 o'clock, because I'm not really sure that he would have been able to play. And so I think we have to take a step back and really say, what were our expectations for these two players and for the Rams team as a whole, right? Was it that we were going to see like a just super juggernaut right away, right off the bat? Because that was not my expectation. Now, I did expect the Rams to come out and play better, right? Not play like complete ass against a division rival, right? Yeah. Now, I will also say that division games are a lot tougher. You know your opponent a little bit better. And so there are times where if there is an upset, a lot of times you will see it within a division matchup, because that team, like I said, the 49ers, who we know the Rams a lot better than if the Rams were playing the Cincinnati Bengals or something like that. And so it's not necessarily as big of a shock that they got blown out because it was the divisional opponent. What I would say is, let's just pump the brakes, okay? The Rams are still a very good football team. I don't think I still think they're going to be right there in contention with the Arizona Cardinals. I think it's the Cardinals' division to lose, but the Rams still have every opportunity to make the playoffs and kind of right these wrongs, right? So let's just pump the brakes. It's literally been one game for these guys. How about Odell Beckham Jr. gets a couple weeks to learn the playbook, right? And actually run more than just a couple routes, because it was great that he caught the first pass of the night. And I believe he only had 2 receptions for 18 yards on the entire game, but let's let him get a little bit more comfortable. Let's let Von Miller get a little more comfortable, completely heal from his injury, and and get used to playing with this defensive line. So I'm not jumping off the bandwagon. I think the Rams are going to be fine. I think they just need a couple of weeks to gel. And one thing that I think we maybe have overlooked is the real loss of Robert Woods, right? Robert Woods maybe isn't a household name like an Odell Beckham Jr. or like a Von Miller, but to this Rams offense, Robert Woods might be one of the most secure, or I'm trying to look for the right word, pieces to this team, right? Like he is so critical to what this Rams offense does, even when he's not getting the ball. He demands so much coverage and attention that when he's gone, I think the 49ers defense was really just able to key in on Cooper and say, okay, we're taking him away. What else do you guys have to offer? So that was a huge loss for them. And Odell Beckham Jr., not knowing the playbook, for as great of a talent as he is, wasn't going to be able to just come in and right away replace Robert Woods, who's been there for basically his entire career.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying with the whole Odell Beckham Jr. and Von Miller not being ready. But, Jared, they already had Jalen Ramsey. They already had Aaron Donald. They already had Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp. There's a lot of those top guys on this team that were not performing before Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. even signed with the team or were even thinking about playing on the field. I think there is cause for concern. And there's one main reason I have that I think will really affect the Rams come playoff time. I just think there is obviously always cause for concern when you're looking at the last two games, right? And the defense has given up 28 plus the last two games, obviously 28 to the Titans 2 weeks ago on Sunday Night Football, and then Monday Night Football with an extra day of preparation, 31 points to essentially an only run team in San Francisco 49ers that lost to my Cardinals with Colt McCoy and everybody out. The defense is not performing at all. And this is early in games, right, Jared? Because what was the score? Like 21-0, 14-0 in this game early. It wasn't like it was over a stretch of time and it was really close the whole time and the 49ers pulled away at the end. They were blowing them out at the beginning of the game. And the Titans took an early lead, and some of it has to do with mistakes by Matthew Stafford and stuff like that. But the defense isn't holding its weight. Then when you look at the offense, and this is the main problem, I'm not going to put the blame on Stafford. I'm going to put the blame on the fact that this team has absolutely no running game whatsoever. Okay, Darrell Henderson Jr. is just not it as an NFL running back. Sony Michel hasn't been enough as an addition. And, last week they only ran 9 times the whole game, Jared. The week before that, they only ran 18 times. And Stafford's thrown the ball over 40 times. Now, I don't have the stats up with me right now with how much Jared Goff threw, but I'm sure that when they traded a bunch, including Jared Goff, to Detroit for Matthew Stafford, they didn't want to have the same exact record after 10 games that Jared Goff had with this team. And to me, Jared, this team actually looks a little bit worse come right now than they did last year. And that's a cause for concern. When you have all these additions, when you add the guys like Von Miller and Odell now, and you added Matthew Stafford in the offseason, there's a cause for concern. There's no running game. And I think in the playoffs, if you have no running game, you cannot win a Super Bowl. And this team can make the playoffs, and that's fine. But when they go on the road to, say, maybe a Green Bay or a Tampa Bay, you think with no running game, this team's gonna win in the playoffs? I don't think so. So I don't think it's about making the playoffs when you sign all these free agents and all these all-stars. I think the Rams are going for a Super Bowl, and I don't think they look like a Super Bowl contender. And that's my main reason right there. No running game. And the defense has just been underperforming this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're 1,000% right that they're going for the Super Bowl, right? You don't give up all of your draft picks basically for the next 3 years and bring in Von Miller and Odell Beckham to not get to the Super Bowl when you are hosting the Super Bowl this year, right?
Yeah.
Before last year, let's not forget, there had never been a team hosting a Super Bowl that had also played, let alone won that game. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the first team in NFL history to ever do that. The Rams are trying to be the second, and they are literally going all in this year. We've already talked about that on the last few podcasts about how because you can only pay, there's a salary cap, you can only pay so many players, right? And you have to be able to draft players that have cheap contracts that can come in and contribute. And the Rams are not going to be able to draft many, top tier players at least for the next couple of years. So they are definitely going all in right now. I will say, as far as the Rams game, I agree that the running game was non-existent on the game, on Monday night. And that was mainly because they were down by so much, right? I mean, I don't care if you're the Cleveland Browns or even the 49ers, right? Some of the best running football teams in the entire NFL. When you were down by double digits, the running game kind of takes a back seat. Like you have to throw the ball a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think for the Rams specifically, and what Sean kind of, built himself on is being able to have a play action game, having a lot of motion and misdirection and that type of thing. But when you're down by double digits, defenses aren't really falling for that, right? There's no real threat of a crazy misdirection and we're gonna have a receiver, but then we're gonna run it to the opposite side. You know what I mean? So I think when the Rams are, if it's a close game or if they're winning and they're up, then I think that's where the Rams are really dangerous. When they're down by double digits, like we saw on Monday, I think you're right. I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble because they can't run the type of offense that they would like to, right? Stafford, he is a very talented quarterback and he can make all the throws. We know on Monday night, 26 for 41, 243 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. That's not the recipe I think that Sean McVay or this Rams team wants. They want a little more balance. They want to be able to run the ball and use that play action. So they have to jump out to those early leads in order to let that defense shine, let Aaron Donald, let Von Miller pin their ears back and just get to the quarterback. But if they can't do that, then yes, I think they will be in trouble. So for the Rams, it's about jumping out to early leads and getting ahead of teams. Because if they fall behind, I think they have to change their offensive philosophy. And that's going to be a recipe for disaster for this team, as we saw on Monday.
Sure. No, and that's a good point. But Jerry, it's not that easy in the NFL to just come out with big leads all the time, right?
No,
I'm
not saying that it's easy. I'm just saying that is the best way for the Rams to win games.
Sure.
Is to in the first quarter, like when you're at the coin toss, the Rams want the ball. Don't defer. You know what I mean? Like the Rams should get the ball every single time to start the game because they should want to go down the field and score the first touchdown and get a lead and have to put pressure on the other team. That's what the Rams should be doing. That
makes sense. No, I get it. There's those little things here and there, like the coin toss. You get the ball first, take off some time off the clock, right? I've always, if I was an NFL team or a college football team or even a high school team, I would always take the ball, take some time off the clock, really get your offense going so they're confident for the rest of the game. Let me just go through. We're going to switch to the Cowboys and Chiefs, some teams that actually know how to score in a second here. But so you look at the beginning of the season for the Rams. They have good wins, very impressive wins against the Bears, on the road against the Colts, and a big win, I believe it was on Sunday Night Football at home versus the Buccaneers, right? Now, I'm not tooting my team's own horn here, but ever since the Cardinals loss, where we blew them out, and they didn't have a lead, and they didn't run the ball, and we looked like all of a sudden an all-star team against them, but I didn't even think we'd win that game. They lose 37-20 against us. They played the Seahawks, Giants, Lions, and Texans the month after that, okay? All those teams, not good defenses. And, the Rams kind of just did what you're supposed to do, right? Like most teams do against really bad teams. The Seahawks having a really bad defense, they're not a really bad team. But you look at the Seahawks, Giants, Lions, Texans, those are some horrendous NFL teams. Of course, you're going to win those games. Then they get back with the Titans and 49ers, and it's like, okay, back to business. And guess who they have next after a bye? The Green Bay Packers. So,
where's that game?
Jaguars after that and all that stuff. But, come on.
Where's that game? Is that in LA or is that in
Green Bay? No,
it's
at Green Bay. So it's just the worst possible situation. Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like maybe the bye will help them and everybody can get healthy. They can integrate Odell. They can integrate Von Miller a lot more. And maybe this team will look like the Super Bowl contender we thought they were when they were beating up on the college football teams, right? But when they play the NFL teams this year, ever since that Cardinals loss, or ever since that Tampa Bay game where they were really impressive, it's kind of been terrible for them. Either they're playing a bad team or they're losing by a lot. And so, again, like you're saying, you can get a lead against the Giants. You can't get a lead against the Titans or the 49ers or the Cardinals or probably the Green Bay Packers in 2 weeks. So just something to think about there. They absolutely, for me, need to prove that they are a Super Bowl contender, because when you look at the stats since week 3, they cannot get leads like you're saying against the good teams, and they can get leads against the bad teams who they won't play in the playoffs. All right, let's switch to some good teams. Let's switch to some good teams, Jared. Your Cowboys, I'll let you celebrate here because my team did not do well this weekend. Your Cowboys absolutely turned it around from last week and blew out the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, Jared, you guys could put 60 on potentially in this.
I wish they would have.
I wish they would have too. I hate that when teams just stop scoring. Like, come on, let's see a 60-pointer in the NFL. Talk about your Cowboys. 2 weeks ago, a brutal loss to the Denver Broncos. Full staff, everybody there. Dak Prescott back, and then now this week. So tell me, what have you seen the last 2 weeks? Who's the real Cowboys team? Is it the team that impressed against the Falcons, or is it the team that had troubles against a good defense in the Broncos?
Oh no, I think 100% it's the team that impressed against the Falcons, right? I think they redeemed themselves by dominating in the fashion that they did. Now, if they would have came out and just beat the Falcons by like a touchdown, or it was a close game and they kept Atlanta in it and Dallas had to kind of drive at the end of the game to score, then I think I'd be a little more hesitant and like, okay, what's going on here in Dallas, right? That maybe we have some more underlying issues that we need to work out. But this team came out and said, all right, the game against Denver was an aberration. It was a fluke, and I'm just going to chalk it up to, what, Denver gets paid to play as well. And I think every NFL team, which we've seen this year, right? We've seen all the good teams. We've seen the Bills lose to the Jaguars. Obviously, we saw the Rams lose on Monday night. We've seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've lost 2 games in a row, right? So yeah. We've seen all these good teams at some point or another in this season have a head-scratching loss. And so I'm just going to chalk up that loss that Dallas had to Denver as a head-scratcher, but they redeemed themselves in a big way. So I am more confident than ever that this Cowboys team is back on track. Dak Prescott, his second game back. I'm not going to make excuses for him, coming back off of that calf injury in the first game against Denver. If you're playing, if you're on the field, if you're going to lace it up and put that helmet on,
sure.
But injuries are not an excuse. If you're too injured, that's okay. Don't play. Let the next man up. But Dak Prescott played, and they just didn't play well. So for me, I'm more excited than ever because they came out and they kind of squashed, to me, narratives about, is Dallas really a good team? Yes, they are, because good teams beat the living crap out of bad teams. And that's exactly what Dallas did to a bad Atlanta team. I think it also helped that Dan Quinn, the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, formerly the Atlanta Falcons head coach, right? That was kind of a revenge game a little bit. I think the players not only wanted to come out and redeem themselves from the crappy game from the previous week, I think they also wanted to win that game a little bit for Dan Quinn, who also got the game ball at the end of the game. So for me, this is about Dallas, kind of improving each and every single week. And this is going to be probably their biggest tests of the year, going to Kansas City against a team that just came off of their most impressive win. So I have a question for you, Mr. Nick Nenad, because we do know how well your Cardinals have played this year. Obviously, they're dealing with some injuries to DeAndre Hopkins and to Kyler Murray. They're 2-star players. But is this Dallas Cowboys Kansas City Chiefs game a potential Super Bowl matchup?
Okay, well, I mean, you know how high I've been on the Cowboys this year, and that's why I was so troubled by the Broncos loss. But you make a good point. It seems like literally everybody has played a bad game this season.
Right.
Now,
I'm
going to say, for us, we were missing all our guys for our bad game. We lost to the Green Bay Packers off essentially one play at the end of the game. I do think the one team that doesn't have like that super questionable loss is us, realistically, because we were missing all our guys last week. And who's supposed to stop Cam Newton when you don't even know he's on a team 2 weeks before, right? I'm going to make all the excuses in the book because, we got our friend RKJ man Ryan Johnson in my head about his team being a Super Bowl contender all of a sudden. And it's like,
not just in your head, but all over Twitter. If you go on Nick Nenad's Twitter, it is filled with and quotes. It's a lot. It's a
Well,
lot.
well,
We're gonna have to get him on the show pretty soon because I need to hear live in person this back and forth. It's one thing to say it on Twitter,
Sure.
to type something out, but I want to hear this back and forth. I'm just gonna sit back with some popcorn and kind of enjoy the show.
Well,
So I
I
think we
just
need to
love
get him on real quick.
I love how much of a hypocrite he is because, he said, I have nothing much to say, and then proceeded to send about 18 tweets. So I don't know how that makes any sense. I didn't say anything, Jared, because I said, Cam Newton is better than whatever I said. I forgot what I said. It's been a long week, obviously. But, it's whatever, right? Your original question was, is this a potential Super Bowl matchup? Yes. Okay. Potential. And because the Cowboys, I think, can be there. Their defense has improved. The offense, when they play like they did last weekend, is kind of unstoppable. Do I think there's still a little bit of questions on defense? Yes. Do I think the offense has been a little bit inconsistent this year? Yes. And you can look at some just random games throughout the season where the Cowboys just haven't performed for some reason on offense where, a little questionable. But more the questionable about this potential Super Bowl matchup is the Chiefs. Okay. They've looked terrible, still won some games, but they've looked terrible. They're only 6-4. They finally play a really, really good game against the Raiders here where Patrick Mahomes goes for over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's the Chiefs we're used to. So yes, Jared, it is a potential Super Bowl matchup if both teams play to the best of their ability. Do I think they're going to be in the Super Bowl? Both of them? No. Do I think one of them can make it? Yes. I'd probably lean toward the Cowboys over anybody, but you'd have to go through my Cardinals. So that's why I put a lot of potential and a lot of questions. Okay. You have to go through my Cardinals twice because we play January 2nd.
Yeah.
But so, it's for me, I want to pose this for you for the Chiefs. Okay. Are they back? Are the Kansas City Chiefs back after this Sunday? Because this, Jared, looked both on offense and defense completely the opposite as it has almost all season. So did something happen? Maybe there was a team meeting? Are the Chiefs back? Obviously, we'll learn about a lot more about the Cowboys. But what do you expect from the Cowboys game this Sunday to point towards maybe if they are back or not?
I want to say they are, but I'm still hesitant. I can't put both feet in. I can't jump all the way in. And here's why. For as great of a performance as Patrick Mahomes had, right, for as good as Travis Kelce looked in his post-game interview, right, he's like, I think I got my swagger back. He was feeling good. And it seems like the Chiefs, that kind of cohesiveness is starting to come back a little bit. Obviously they have all the weapons in the world, right? We know that. And eventually, in my head at least, I was like, okay, we're waiting. When's it going to come? When's it going to come? When is this team finally going to click? And it did happen on Sunday. But I think part of the reason why they played so well was because the Raiders are just in shambles, right? Obviously, we all know about John Gruden and what has transpired there, right? Henry Ruggs and how he is no longer on the team. I believe it's is it David Arnett or something Arnett?
Damon.
Right?
Damon.
Yeah, Damon Arnett, their former first-round cornerback, who was drafted in the same year as Henry Ruggs, right? So 2 former first-round picks who are no longer on the team because of conduct issues and making terrible decisions. So I think this Raiders organization is kind of just in shambles and not necessarily all in on football right now. And so it was kind of like the perfect matchup for the Chiefs to say, okay, not only is it a divisional rival opponent, not only is it on football, this is an opportunity to take advantage of a team that is in shambles. And that's exactly what they did. And so while I think it was great for the Chiefs, I would like to see them do that against a legitimate opponent. And they will have an opportunity to do that against my Cowboys this Sunday. I think this is really one of their biggest tests, and more so from a defensive standpoint, because I think this offense, like they're going to be fine. The real question for this team is, can this defense hold up? We've seen in the last couple of weeks they have started to improve. They're not better, right? They're not a great defense, but we've seen them make small changes to where they're leaning more towards a bend but don't break defense. The first 7-8 games of the year, they were a bend and completely break defense. They were giving up lot of touchdowns left and right. They just couldn't stop anybody. So for me, how are they going to handle this Cowboys offense that not only runs the ball very successfully, but obviously with the weapons that they have at receiver, they can throw the ball whenever they want. They also got Michael Gallup back last week, who obviously showed what he means to this team. He made a great fourth down catch, and he's kind of a somewhat of a security blanket for Dak Prescott. And so I think obviously the Chiefs are going to be in this game. It's at home. They're going to lean on this crowd. But in my opinion, this is the biggest test for this Chiefs team. Can they handle Dallas's offense? I'm almost certain that the Chiefs offense is going to be able to do their thing, and they're going to score points. Can this Chiefs defense stop Dallas enough to get the done? I'm not so sure. I don't think they can.
Yeah, well, I'll say this about this game. This is obviously more important, I believe, for the Chiefs that they win this game than the Cowboys. Only because the Cowboys, obviously, a little better record, but we know what to expect kind of from the Cowboys. And, like, you can lose a football game in the NFL, and we're not going to say you're the worst team in the world, especially if it's a shootout and it's like 40-3-40 and all that stuff, right? Sometimes these games, Jared, come down to just whoever has the ball last. Right. And so your team can lose, but it just literally is about, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes had the ball with 1:30 left, and that's why they won. Right. But if the Chiefs can go in and beat the Cowboys, looking at the rest of their season, Jared, it's a lot of divisional games, but also a lot of winnable games. And realistically, if they go in and beat the Cowboys, they should beat the rest of these teams that they play the rest of the season. They play the Broncos twice. They play the Raiders and Chargers, and they play the Steelers and the Bengals, right? All of those teams, they should beat if they're at the top of the game, right, Jared? Like, they should go undefeated at the end of the rest of the season if they play like they did last week. So I think this is a really, really important game for the Chiefs because, like I've been talking about with the Rams, you can beat the bad teams, and you can beat the team that has a bunch of guys getting arrested and a coach that's racist and all this stuff. That's fine, right? But if you can't go in at home and beat a legitimate Super Bowl contender, what are we going to be saying when you come to the playoffs? Oh, well, you beat the Broncos twice? Cool. Nobody cares, right? Oh, you beat the Raiders twice? Okay, what are you supposed to do? You beat the Chargers? Well, you lost to them last game. You probably should win, right? You beat the Steelers? Who cares, right? And the Bengals, I don't even know if they're going to be a playoff team by the time they play them week 17. So, Jared, this is very important. This is why we're talking about this game on this podcast, because I think it has a lot to do with the Chiefs season. I mean, this is essentially the Chiefs season right here. And whether we can call them true Super Bowl contenders after this game.
No, you're right. You're not wrong. And I will make an argument for why this could be bigger for Dallas. Right. And it's, I don't know if I can make, great arguments like what you said, but I will say this as far as the schedule goes, every single year, because Dallas always plays on Thanksgiving, they always run through a 3-game gauntlet in a short period of time. Right. So they're obviously playing this Sunday at Kansas City. And then they're playing on Thanksgiving Day, which is a Thursday. So they have a short week at home against the Raiders, who we just talked about are in shambles. They should be able to beat them fairly easily. Right. One would hope. And then they play the following Thursday again at New Orleans. So to me, this is a big stretch for Dallas to say, okay, you guys have played well. You guys are 7-2 currently. If they can get through these 3 stretch of games in a short period of time, this is really going to tell me what this Dallas team can do later on in the season. Because after this 3-game stretch, I think it's the Cardinals are the only other real opponent contender that Dallas has to deal with. Obviously, they have to play some divisional opponents who are hovering around the 500 mark. Most of them are below 500 at the moment. But this is a big stretch for Dallas if they can get through this 3-game stretch, either undefeated or at the very least 2-1. Last thing I will say, in the next couple weeks on the defensive side of the ball, they're going to get back DeMarcus Lawrence, their best edge rusher. They're going to get back Randy Gregory, who they just put on IR. They're going to get back Neville Gallimore, who's probably their best interior defensive lineman, right? That's going to free up Micah Parsons, who is probably rookie of the year, right? He can still play defensive end, but play linebacker, he can roam around. So Dallas is going to get some pieces back on defense, and I think that is only going to help that stingy defense, obviously. So, like I said, I'm hopeful and I'm excited, but let's get through this 3-game stretch. Hopefully, get some of these defenders back, and if they can do that, I think this team is really ascending towards a Super Bowl run.
No, sure, but Jared, it's a big football game. It's a big football game on Sunday, and I have obviously. I mean, as you guys know from last week, I'm going to be on a flight Sunday coming from Connecticut after the Harvard-Yale college football game. But I think that might be my plane flight game, right? That might be my game I just have on the TV the whole time, or maybe
it better.
Jared, I'll buy the Wi-Fi to watch that kind of game. You know, my Cardinals play at 1.
Put it with you. I'll buy it for you.
Sure. Yeah. No. Well, I'll have my Sunday ticket hooked up. I'll watch my Cardinals. You know, I'll flip back and forth between the Cardinals and the Cowboys this Sunday. It's going to be good because we play the Seahawks. So that's a big game for us. Russ back, Kyler back, big game. Jared, let's get back into my Cardinals a little bit. Obviously, we completely crapped the bed this weekend. You know, I think, obviously, if I was a truly betting man, which you know I am, this would have been a game where, like, this may be the one game of the season I would have bet against the Cardinals. Because I'd be like, okay, back up 2 weeks in a row. Everybody's seen Colt McCoy. They already know where Chase Edmonds is out. You know, they already know Hopkins is out. Everybody's out, right, before the game. Panthers get Cam back. This is probably not going to be good for us, right? Carolina blows us out, right? Our offense can't stay on the field. The defense just got tired after a while, even in the first half, and it just wasn't good. You know, we're dealing with injuries all over the place. We were having walkthroughs just on practice days because of how many injuries we're dealing with right now. I'm not making excuses. I want to turn to the Panthers, though. They get Cam back. Okay, he scores 2 touchdowns. Obviously, he wasn't the starting quarterback in this game, but he looked really impressive. He probably had the highlight of the week with the touchdown, running over one of our defenders, and then, you know, yelling, "I'm back!" You know, that's
that was not good of your Cardinals.
He got a penalty, guys, by the way, for taking his helmet off. Okay, he didn't get a penalty for yelling. Okay.
Get out of here! I don't want to hear that.
A lot of people were like, "Hey, Cam, no, you can't take your helmet off right after you score." It's everybody.
Why not?
I don't know, Jared. It's the same reason why I don't know why the whole defense for the Panthers can intercept Colt McCoy and then run to the other end zone and take a team photo, and that's not a penalty. But then Cam, it's stupid. The NFL's stupid sometimes. We know this. But we're hearing this week now that Cam Newton might be the starter. That is a surprise to me because he just rejoined the team, and it's not like it's Riverboat Ron, who was the coach there before. This is a completely new offense with Matt Rule, and it's not meant for Cam Newton, essentially, right? Cam Newton wasn't here when Matt Rule was the coach here, and Joe Brady wasn't there. So I'll toss it to you, Jared. If Cam Newton is healthy, this is a top 10 defense in the NFL. Christian McCaffrey's back. Kind of seems like the perfect storm. Are the Carolina Panthers a playoff team with Cam as their quarterback?
No.
Ooh.
No, they're not.
Okay.
And I hate to say that. I really do because I love Cam. Cam should not have been out of football this long. Unless he was rehabbing and teams that knew that he wasn't 100%. But to my knowledge, he's been healthy and just, it unfortunately took an injury to Sam Darnold for Cam Newton to get back on an NFL roster. But to me, Cam should have been on the team as long as he was healthy already. But for as great as last week was, right, against a depleted Cardinals team, I'm not so sure that Cam is the answer to get this team back to the playoffs. I think there are too many holes on the offensive side of the ball. Yes, Christian McCaffrey is back, and he hopefully can stay healthy because it's been touch and go for the last couple of weeks. But really the only offense that they have right now, right? What's Cam going to do? Do we really expect Cam to throw for 250, 300 yards a game, 3 touchdown passes, 1 rushing touchdown per game, and kind of rejuvenate himself like he's the 2015 Cam Newton, right, where he won the MVP and guided that Carolina Panthers team to the Super Bowl, even though where they lost? I don't see it. I'm sorry, I don't. Now, I do think that he is the best option over a healthy Sam Darnold and over a backup in PJ Walker. I will say that I think Cam Newton, once he gets that playbook, deserves to be the starter because he is the most talented quarterback. I just don't think that this team as a whole has enough weapons or pieces to make it to the playoffs, right? I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers clearly, and I even think that the Saints could be a better team and more of a playoff contender than the Panthers are. So for as great of a story as this is, and as much as I'm rooting for Cam to come back, I just simply don't see him, all of a sudden reverting back to that 2015 Cam and carrying this Carolina Panthers team to the playoffs. Don't see it.
Well, let's just say this, Jay. Okay, because when you look at the standings right now, and I'm trying to find I tweeted or I sent out a picture to people of the toughest schedules for the rest of the year, and I think the Panthers were one of the toughest schedules. But as of right now, the NFC standings look like this: you have Green Bay and the Cardinals at the top, Dallas right below them. Just they played a bye, so they're only 7-2, and you got Tampa Bay, and those are the division winners, and then you got the Rams, right? And all those teams have 2 or 3 losses, right? Number 6 in the NFC right now is the New Orleans Saints. They don't have Jameis Winston. We could argue probably every week who should be their starting quarterback, because I think I'm going to backtrack a little bit on me saying that Trevor Siemian should be the starter, because it's not looking good. It's not looking good after last week. But like I said, every week in the NFL seems to be different, so you never know. Number 7 is the Panthers at 5-5. Yeah, and one of the reasons they're 5-5 is because they just played more games than the Minnesota Vikings and the San Francisco 49ers and the Atlanta Falcons. But, Jared, I only think realistically that the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings actually have better talent and have a better chance at making the playoffs than Carolina. After what happened with the Falcons, after what you guys did to the Falcons, you can't tell me that's a playoff team. Come on. Right? But because of the additions Carolina gets and because of their defense, I look at them as potentially at least being that 7 seed. Right? And maybe even better than the Saints, because I think right now the Carolina Panthers with Cam and everybody healthy, of course, I don't see why they're not better than the Saints. They're not better than Tampa, of course, but why they're not the second best team in their division. And right now, if Carolina just ends up as the second best team in their division, I think they make the playoffs. So that's why I'll go that I think they should, they'll probably be a playoff team. When you look at their schedule for the rest of the season, they play Washington, Miami, Atlanta. Those are all winnable games, but they do end the season with the Bills and the Buccaneers twice, along with the Saints. So obviously, a very, very difficult end of the season, right? But if they can win all those other winnable games, they end up 9-7, 8-8. You never know. But maybe if Cam is back and the running game is working for them, maybe they can steal one, Tampa Bay, right? Maybe they can do what the Jaguars did with the Buffalo Bills and beat them. I don't know. I'm just saying. High? No, Jared. I'm just saying, do you really think who do you think is better than them at this point in the NFC? Do you think the Saints without a quarterback are better than the Carolina Panthers? Do you think the Atlanta Falcons are better than the Carolina Panthers? Okay.
Not at all.
Do you think the Minnesota Vikings, the inconsistent Minnesota Vikings, who every week you have no idea who's going to show up, do you think they are better than the Carolina Panthers right now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so then I guess we disagree to disagree then. Because I think with their defense and with McCaffrey back and Cam healthy, that's the best team for me in the NFC besides Tampa and the Rams.
Listen.
It's not saying much. Jerry, I'm not saying the Super Bowl contenders. I'm just saying they're the 6th best team.
I get that, and I get what you're saying about Cam. I already talked about that, and that defense. Yes, I think the defense. The first 3 weeks of the season they were top 5. They've obviously leveled off a little bit, but I think they're still right there. They're still a good defense. But I can't ignore this schedule, and you brought it up, and that was going to be my rebuttal to you. But here's the thing: the next 3 weeks are winnable games. Yes, they're playing against Washington, who Ron Rivera is their head coach, so that's going to be a big game not only for the Carolina Panthers but for Cam Newton.
Yep.
because him and Christian McCaffrey are playing against their former head coach. So I can see Carolina, coming out and playing well because they want to come out and beat their former head coach. So I think there's that extra motivation right there. So I can see them winning that game. Then they're at the Dolphins the following week. That's a winnable game as well because the Dolphins, 1 week, they look good, right? They come out and they beat the Ravens. And then, but who knows with Tua, he's still got that messed up thumb. Not sure how good he's actually going to be. Then they play the Falcons at home. That should be a win. So realistically, I can see Carolina potentially winning their next 3 games. Problem is, I don't see them winning a game after that. I think they go 0-4 to end the season. They ain't beating the Bills in Buffalo. They're not beating the Buccaneers twice. I don't think they beat them at all. And I think the Saints in New Orleans, yes, you're right. They don't have a starting quarterback, right? Or at least Trevor Siemian does not seem like the guy. But that defense to me is nasty. The defense for the Saints to me is the reason why I think they're still in some type of playoff contention. So Carolina right now, if they win their next 3 games, as currently constructed, sitting at 5-5, they will be 8-5 heading into the last month of the season. I think they finish 8-9 at the end of the year because I simply don't see how they're beating the Buccaneers, how they beat the Bills, and how they beat the Saints. So I can kind of get on board with you for the next couple games. Yeah, the defense can whoop on the Dolphins and whoop on the Falcons and probably handle a Washington offense, but they ain't gonna handle the Buccaneers and Tom Brady. Yeah, Tom Brady and that offense hasn't looked great, but it's still Tom Brady. They're gonna get it together. The Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, right? Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, that good offensive line. I don't think so. In Buffalo, in the cold, nope, not happening. So yes, like I said, that was my whole argument in the beginning. I want to believe in the Panthers, more specifically Cam Newton, but I can't get myself to do it because of the schedule that they have coming up. If they had an easier schedule, I'd be more on board with you. Not gonna happen.
Fair enough. Like I mentioned, I found the stat. Hardest strength of schedule, Carolina Panthers #1 in the NFL. But that was Jared. That was before they played my Cardinals, who were the #1 team in the NFL. They obviously get through them without Kyler. That's where the strength of schedule kind of doesn't work out. And I'll give you this too. When you look at easiest strength of schedule, the Eagles actually have the second easiest schedule. And when you look at that Cowboys game at the end of the season, Jared, you guys might not even care that game. So the Eagles, like I'm saying, they might be that one team that kind of sneaks in. And that's why I mentioned them as, when you look at them and the Saints, I think that because of the Eagles schedule, they might get in over Carolina. But, I think if Carolina can win, 4 games the rest of the season, I think they make the playoffs, right? They have a habit of blowing it at the end of the season, and you can ask our friend RKJ Man about that. And they tend to never beat the Saints at the end of the season. But this is the worst Saints team that has existed since Drew Brees joined the team a couple years ago. So maybe that changes, and I think the Carolina Panthers are a little bit better than they have been the last few years since Cam left the team, even when Cam was with the team. All right, Jay, let's switch it up. There's obviously a lot more NFL topics we could talk about, but we're going to switch it up to college football for the rest of this podcast. There's a lot of things we need to see next week in order to crown teams Super Bowl champions. Like a lot of people are on TV right now, like the New England Patriots, all of a sudden they beat the Browns without running backs. And with COVID issues, now everybody thinks that Bill Belichick's going to win his 8th Super Bowl. Okay? No. We're going to wait to see what they do this week and what they do Thursday against Falcons, who the Cowboys just blew out. So we're not going to talk about them. We're not going to talk about the Browns and all these teams that lost and stuff like that. And so we're going to switch to college football. Jared, last week, obviously, we had a lot of fun doing our live college football rankings review because of the Michigan State debacle being behind Michigan. And then Ohio State also being behind Oregon when that was the exact same scenario, right? Oregon beats Ohio State. Ohio State's behind them. Makes sense. Michigan State beats Michigan the week before. They lose to Purdue, and all of a sudden they're behind them. So it didn't make a lot of sense. Speaking of fun, okay, like I mentioned, will be at the Harvard-Yale college football game. And before we get into college football, I want to just do our little cheap plug for the rest of the podcast here. Because I don't want to do it at the end. I don't want to do it at the end.
Don't sell Yale short. Don't sell your brother short like that. They're not cheap.
No. No. I'm saying that that this is our cheap plug in the middle of the podcast so that people actually listen to the plug and they don't think the podcast is over, right? So I'm going to do it before we get into the college football section. But yes, so this podcast is being released on Friday, right? And so the game is tomorrow if you're watching, or hey, this morning you gotta turn that game on, right? But you will also be seeing Cover 2 podcast content primarily Saturday. And probably exclusively Saturday from the Harvard-Yale game. Obviously, there's going to be some drinks involved and stuff like that, so I will do my best with camera work and all that stuff. But yes, it will be fun, and you guys will get to see a different experience from the Cover 2 podcast. There will be, kind of some vlogging going on, some videos of the tailgates, obviously videos from the game. Some news to discuss about my brother. He is very, very, very questionable for the game. He has a small injury that he's dealing with, so maybe not the type of chase content that you've seen the last couple of weeks. But I will have content from the game, the crowds, the fans, the students that are there. There will be a lot to talk about, or a lot to film, and so it is can't miss stuff from the Cover 2 podcast, and I'm very, very excited this Saturday. Apparently, you can't get a hotel in New Haven, Connecticut right now, or in the area. So this seems like it's going to be a pretty big crowd, and it's going to be a fun time. So yeah, I'll have all the content ready.
Go Chase.
Absolutely.
Go Chase.
And go Yale. I'm wearing by the way, brand new sweatshirt I'm going to be wearing during the game, and it's going to be like 20 degrees, which is going to be super fun for me, who doesn't do well in the cold. So that's gonna be awesome.
Nick, you kind of look like a student, by the way. I mean, I think you could pass for like a Yale student.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you got the hat, the sweater, I mean, the clean shaven, the baby face.
I get a lot of
go in there and yeah.
It's I have that youthful appearance. I've been told that before. I don't take that as a not a compliment. I take that as a compliment. All right, let's get into college football. Let's get into the FBS, right? College football playoff. There's no change. Okay, this week we have Georgia number 1 still, Alabama number 2, Oregon number 3, Ohio State number 4, Cincinnati still number 5 out of the top 4, and then of course we have the Michigan State thing. Okay, now last week we're not going to recap these games or anything, but we're going to look straight ahead to the games ahead because there's just more important. Ohio State blows out Purdue. Not even close. Purdue beat Michigan State. So, Jared, maybe that Michigan State ranking still makes a little bit of sense, right? But then again, why is Ohio State not ahead of Oregon at that point? So still questions in the top 7 as well, right? I think it's a little bit more fair after this week that Michigan State is behind Michigan because the team they lost to got blown out by Ohio State, who has kind of had a topsy-turvy season this year. But again, still what doesn't make sense is that Oregon or Ohio State isn't ahead of Oregon because Oregon is, their losses to Stanford. And Stanford is not, maybe might even make a bowl. So interesting stuff there as far as games. Last week, nothing else really happened. Alabama with a blowout of New Mexico State. Obviously, that was a huge game. Georgia gets an easy win against, an easy win against Tennessee.
Covered the spread, by the way, right? Wasn't that like the biggest
51
spread of the year? And what was it 50 something?
I think they barely beat
what it was.
They barely beat it. So good job on Vegas. They made it tough for probably a lot of bettors this weekend. But I think actually New Mexico State went up 3-0 in that game, which is kind of funny.
They did. They said they went up 3-0.
And last week, and UConn, who their only win is against my brother's Yale Bulldogs, unfortunately. They went up on a 99-yard touchdown, 7-0 on Clemson last week. So it was kind of a crazy, crazy week. Clemson, all we've heard this week is that they think they should be in the top 25 with 4 losses, which is just, come on, guys. Come on. Stop it. They're a horrible team this season. But let's get into this week's, college football slate, Jared, because this is where I really want to go. But there's some huge games. Okay, and we're going to stick to the top 25, of course. Really
Georgia, quick. Charleston Southern, baby. Let's go.
That's a huge game. Right? That's a big game. Jared, Texas A&M and Prairie View A&M, 7-3 versus 7-2. These are some big games.
What I'm talking about.
Mississippi State versus Tennessee State. That's what I'm talking about. Let's see what else is on the docket this weekend.
You know.
You know what? Not much else.
Listen, we're looking for the best matchups here. Okay.
Yeah. No, I obviously, guys, we're joking.
You can't.
It's ridiculous.
I'm being dead serious. We got the UAB Blazers against the number 22 ranked UTS
undefeated.
Say Roadrunners. Yeah, undefeated. Let's see. UAB is who? Who's UAB?
Alabama Birmingham.
Thank you. And UTSA?
That's the University of Texas San Antonio.
All right.
That's at the Alamo Dome.
They had a football team.
That is at the Alamo Dome. They're undefeated, Jared. 10-0. Give them some respect. Give them some respect.
That's why we're shouting them out. That's why we're shouting them out.
I agree. No, guys. Obviously, these are ridiculous games that happen at the end of the season for the SEC. Typical. UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio. UAB is just in their conference, so there's nothing they can really do about that. But yeah, I mean, SEC is taking the week off. It seems like, and so we'll get into the other games. Biggest game this weekend, Jared, is Ohio State number 4 versus Michigan State. Okay, Ohio State coming into this game a 19-point favorite. Okay,
wow.
Michigan State, come on, man, they were like what, number 2 a couple weeks ago? Like, what is this college football season, man? So a 19-point favorite, Ohio State at home. We just saw what happened last week. The team Michigan State lost to by 2 possessions, got murdered by Ohio State. Jared, is there anything to this line? And do we see, first of all, Michigan State beating the spread? And number 2, do we see this being a closer game? And do we see this being a legitimate chance for Michigan State to beat Ohio State in this game? Or do you think last week and the 2 weeks before that, or Michigan State lost to Purdue and Ohio State's win last week were kind of just flukes, and it's more about getting to these kind of games?
So if we go back a couple weeks to that Michigan State game, when Michigan State won that game, I was like all on board, 2 feet in, Michigan State all the way, go Sparty, all that stuff, right? Since then, obviously the loss to Purdue hurt really bad. The Maryland team, that's complete hot garbage. So I think that fizzle has kind of dried out a little bit. Ohio State, I think, is playing some of the best football of the entire season. CJ Stroud finally is healthy, right? He was dealing with that shoulder injury to begin the year, and I'm not blaming him or that as the reason why they lost to Oregon. But obviously Ohio State was still trying to find themselves and their identity and all that stuff. I think they have clearly done that, and they are well deservingly the number 4 seed right now. To me, the only thing that Michigan State should be looking at is that spread at 19. That's disrespect.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I get how good Ohio State is playing, but Michigan State is still number 7. That 19-point spread is, to me, some disrespect. If I'm the Michigan State head coach, I mean, not that you're obviously they care about covering the spread. To me, it's just more about like, do people really not, like, outside of Michigan State, do y'all really not believe in us that much to where we're a 19-point dog? 19 points and we're ranked number 7? Like, this has to be one of the largest spreads for an underdog that is ranked in the top 10, like in recent memory that I can remember. So to me, if I'm a Michigan State fan or a Michigan State player or anything like that, I'm looking at this and I'm saying they don't think anything of us. They don't care about what we did against Michigan. They don't care about what we've done earlier in the year. It is literally Michigan State against the world. Now, I think Ohio State's going to come out and handle their business. But if I'm Michigan State, that's how I'm going into this game. It is Michigan State against everybody else. Because clearly, not only the college football committee, who won't even put them ahead of Michigan, who they already beat, but clearly the bettors and everyone else doesn't seem to think that Michigan State is worth a lick, even though they're ranked number 7. So, I like I said, Ohio State is going to win this football game, but Michigan State should have all of the, bulletin board material that they need just by the spread and by how they've been treated in the college football playoff so far.
This is a crazy line, Jared. Like, I'm glad you're talking so much about this. I mean, yeah, it's 19. So, I mean, essentially, Ohio State, they think that Michigan State will lose by almost 4 possessions in this game. The money line is minus 1,100 for Ohio State. Like, Jared, if you put $100 on Michigan State this weekend, you'll win 700 if they win. Like, that's not. I don't even think that's that bad of a bet, right? Because Michigan State's number 7. One loss. This is crazy. And Ohio State. I mean, I know they lost to Oregon, but like, the rest of their schedule is kind of, dog crap realistically this season. Like they're impressing, but I mean, even against Nebraska, they struggled a little bit. And CJ Stroud, like, it really is just they're almost basing it completely on how you play against Purdue, and I don't think that's how you should, rate a college football. It's ridiculous. I'm going to go to the stats really quickly on this game, for what these teams, do. I think the big thing, obviously, you have CJ Stroud. He is playing, sort of like a Heisman now, and I almost think this game might be for the Heisman. Realistically, whoever wins this game, if Kenneth Walker can beat CJ Stroud in a game as a running back, then I think at that point, Kenneth Walker III might be the shoe-in for Heisman. But, rush yards allowed per game, only 107 by Ohio State. So it's not like, and that might seem like a lot, but college football's, there's extra yards just gained, right, per game. That's not a lot. And so it almost seems like Ohio State's strength is stopping Kenneth Murray. Not Kenneth Murray, excuse me. That's a linebacker for the Los Angeles Chargers. Kenneth Walker III. That's where the interesting part is for me. And maybe that's where this line comes from a little bit. Because if Michigan State can't run the ball, they really have no chance at winning. Because that's their strength. Their strength is giving the ball to your star running back, and then Shane Thorne, the quarterback, has more open passes because you can do the play action, like we were talking about with the Rams at the beginning of the podcast, right? When you have somewhat competent running, you can throw the ball. When we saw against Purdue, that Kenneth Walker was getting stopped, and essentially besides one long run, he didn't have too good of a game. They weren't able to play well, and Shane Thorne made a lot of bad passes, and he looked like, the backup he was like last year, okay? So, that's the key for Michigan State is running the ball, trying to beat that yards per game allowed by the Ohio State offense, and just keeping C.J. Stroud in that monster Ohio State offense with Chris Olave and all those awesome wide receivers and Master Teague and all those running backs, keeping them off the field. Keep it a low-scoring game. It's not easy, and it's not set up for Michigan State to win, but if I'm a bettor, guys, come on. They're not going to lose by 19. I don't see that happening. I see this being too close of a game. I know it's in Ohio State, but I think Michigan State will set up. I could see this being a one-touchdown game, to be honest. This is going to be a lot closer, and I'm going to give a little bit more respect because they do have a running game, unlike certain NFL teams, and so I'm going to give them a little bit of credit. Let's move to probably the second biggest game this weekend, as far as college football playoff, rankings go. Oregon at Utah. Okay, Utah's number 23. Obviously, they don't have a chance at the college football playoff. But Oregon 9-1, number 3. It's in Utah. Utah's favored by 3. Okay, against the number 3 team in the nation. Jared, what do you think about this game? Do you think this is finally when Oregon kind of just gets upset again? And I feel like we've all just been waiting for Oregon to lose again. They will most likely play Utah in the Pac-12 championship game, but if they don't win this one, I think they're out, and I think they have to go undefeated, obviously, the rest of the season because of the teams behind them. What do you think? Utah at home, favored. Oregon on the road, not favored. What's going on here with this game?
This is setting up as an upset to me. And it's something about playing at Utah for a night game, right? Like, if this was a day game, 10, 11, 12 o'clock game, something like that, I would feel a lot more confident about Oregon going in there and handling their business. I don't know why. I think it's because maybe I follow USC, and every single time that USC or another Pac-12 opponent goes to Utah for a night game, it is always a very close game, right? Like USC has been has lost to Utah. They have been upset multiple times, and I think the same thing could happen. Now, you're right. Obviously, Utah has zero chance in the world of making the college football playoff. But what they can do is not only knock off a division opponent, but they can solidify themselves and probably jump into the teens. Maybe get a good bowl, New Year's Day bowl game or something like that. Who knows? What I'm saying is, and this is really the only line I have to go off of because Oregon has more talent, coaching staff, all that stuff. It's just something about playing at Utah at night under those lights in those conditions, right? I don't know what it is, man, but I think Oregon will. I think Utah's going to be able to. They're going to have some trick plays, I think, and they're going to have some couple special teams. It's not just going to be offense or defense. It's going to be special teams and a couple trick plays, and I think Oregon has a chance to pull off the upset. So no real analysis. I can't just say, oh well, Utah's their number one ranked defense or they passed the ball. You know what I mean? I can't give you those types of stats. I just know from watching USC and watching other Pac-12 teams that go to play Utah at night in Utah, a lot of times it's tough. A lot of times there is an upset, whether Utah is ranked or unranked. They are tough to play against at home at night. I have one little hanging fruit to go off of, and I'm sticking with it.
For that game, I'm looking at my iPhone weather app, and on Saturday, 45 degrees is the high. And it's 50% chance of rain.
See, that doesn't bother me because Oregon plays in the rain all the time. Right? They deal with cold weather conditions. This isn't like USC or UCLA or a warm weather team. That to me, and I thought about that for a minute, but the weather to me, I don't think will impact. I think that can only help Oregon because they practice in the rain. They play in the rain all the time. So to me, that's a wash. I'm glad you brought that up, but I don't think that is a factor when it comes to this Oregon team.
True. Well, yeah, no, and obviously Oregon has a pretty incredible running game at times. They're what do you call it? They're averaging 227 rush yards per game. But when you look at the stats for both these teams, Jared, let's listen to this. Points per game, 35, both teams. Points allowed per game, 22 for Oregon, 23 for Utah. Total yards, 441 for Oregon, 438 for Utah. Okay? It's like the same on everything. The only anomaly I can see a little bit is Oregon has about 40 more pass yards given up this season, and rush yards allowed. Utah's a little bit more, which obviously doesn't help them. But this is pretty even. But like you said, Utah at home, they're undefeated this season, and that's including a win against ASU. Their losses this season have been to two ranked teams in San Diego State and Utah, and then on the road to Oregon State. That's obviously not the best one in the world, and that really hurts their ranking a little bit and their status in college football's top 25. But they are undefeated at home. What makes it so that they wouldn't do that again? I'm going to go with the upset as well, Jared. I think that Oregon is out and that the Pac-12 championship game will be played for solely the Rose Bowl, and that's it. It's going to be an interesting game. I will definitely tune in. Obviously, I'll be pretty liquored up at that point when that game is starting, having been already to the Yale Harvard game. It's good, Jared. I'm going to get to see those East Coast time games, right? Like these games are going to be starting at 10 o'clock and stuff like that for me. It's going to be pretty crazy. So I'll try to watch as much as I can. But yeah, I think I might throw a bet on Utah. I might throw a bet on Utah to win that game this Saturday and pull off the. I just wish Oregon was favored. Then you could win a little bit more money, right?
That's what I'm saying. The bettors know something too.
Other games this weekend that have college football playoff implications. We mentioned some of those ridiculous games like Georgia. Wake Forest. They had obviously a brutal loss earlier this season to North Carolina, which really hurt their college football playoff standing. They still are number 10, and it seems like the college football playoff is trying to somehow keep the ACC in. Wake Forest at Clemson. If they can take down Clemson pretty easily, that definitely helps their standing. That's a solid game for Wake Forest, who's number 10, like I mentioned. Notre Dame plays Georgia Tech. They should win that game. Notre Dame is number 8. Alabama playing Arkansas. That's another ranked team that will just help them bolster that second spot and potentially being a 2-loss college football playoff competitor. Michigan is playing Maryland on the road. We also have, let me get down here really quickly, Oklahoma State playing Texas Tech on the road. Oklahoma State is number 9. And then here's an interesting one, Jared. Cincinnati, who's obviously number 5, they are 10-0. They are playing 8-2 SMU. This might actually be their hardest game all season besides Notre Dame. So that's a big game. And I think if Cincinnati can really put it on SMU, you might see the college football playoff committee give them a little bit more respect. Again, if Cincinnati ends up ending this season beating the opponents that they're supposed to play, who are their toughest opponents besides Notre Dame, and blowing all of them out, I think at that point you almost have to put them in the college football playoff, because what else are they supposed to do, right? They did schedule Notre Dame. So it's interesting. I think obviously if Oregon loses like we're predicting, it doesn't matter anymore. But yeah, and I think as long as Notre Dame keeps winning, why is Cincinnati getting punished for that? If Notre Dame ends up like number 6 behind them, why is that not a huge win for them earlier this season?
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, Cincinnati is rooting for Utah. They are the biggest Utah fans right now, right?
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, then what Cincinnati has to do is blow out the rest of their opponents, right? Because they're not in a Power 5, it's not okay for them to just win. They have to win in dominating fashion, right? To prove that they're just not beating people, that they are in that upper echelon tier. And then, so yeah, if Oregon continues to win and the college football playoff stays as Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, and Ohio State leading up, right, to those championship weekend games, then Cincinnati, like I said, has to blow the rest of their opponents out. And then Georgia's going to play Alabama in the SEC championship game. And Cincinnati has to hope that one team like wins kind of convincingly, right? Whether it's Georgia whooping Alabama or vice versa. Because I think if Georgia and Alabama is a close field goal game or even touchdown game, and you can tell that both teams are competitive and in it, I think, especially for Georgia, because that would only mean one loss for them if they were to lose, but Alabama with 2 losses, like, it's still Alabama, right?
Yeah.
And so is the committee really going to put a Cincinnati team ahead of an Alabama team?
Yeah.
I really think Cincinnati has to blow out their opponents. And this is probably one of their biggest tests of the year, other than playing Notre Dame. So if they can blow out SMU, and then they either hope for a Utah upset of Oregon, or when we get to the championship weekend, Georgia or Alabama, convincingly blows out the other. That's what Cincinnati's hoping for.
Sure. No, it's very interesting stuff. One more thing I want to say about that Michigan State-Ohio State game. I looked ahead a little bit to next week's games. So obviously Ohio State plays Michigan. Jared, maybe we see Ohio State look ahead to that game somehow too, right? 2 big games in a row. Sometimes you look ahead at the bigger game, down the road, right? So maybe that's something we see in this game as well. They looking ahead at Michigan, who's the best Michigan team we've seen probably since Jim Harbaugh became head coach.
I don't think so for Ohio State. I would say that more for Michigan. Here's why not for Ohio State. Ohio State already has 1 loss to Oregon, obviously, who is ahead of them. Ohio State can't look ahead. Ohio State loses 1 more game, they're out. Doesn't matter, right? Ohio State, I just talked about Alabama potentially staying in the college football playoff with 2 losses. Ohio State, they get 2 losses, they're out. There's zero argument to make for them staying in the college football playoff with 2 losses. So they can't overlook Michigan State, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Michigan, however, you're right. This is for like all the marbles when they play Ohio State next week. This is their championship game because Michigan already has 1 loss and they're currently on the outside looking in. So to me, if I'm Ohio State, this is all about Michigan State, right? This is all about I can't look at Michigan until Saturday evening or Sunday. Or when that clock hits 000 in the 4th quarter. I can't do that because, like I said, Ohio State with 2 losses, bye-bye. There's zero argument, in my opinion, for them staying in.
Well, let's just say this, Jared, okay? Let's say Ohio State does lose to let's say this. Let's say Ohio State beats Michigan State this weekend. So
As they should.
And I think at that point also I mean, it's interesting. Maybe you jump Ohio State over Oregon at that point, but against Oregon on the road against Utah is also a pretty damn good win. So yeah, maybe it stays the same. But let's say Ohio State's still at least number 4. Okay, Cincinnati number 5, right? Michigan being number 6 at that point still. Ohio State loses to Michigan. No, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess none of the two teams thinking about it now because of the process of elimination. Michigan then would jump up. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so dude, man, Cincinnati's gonna get screwed. This is
that.
But here's the okay, no. Here, I'll do this scenario because the Big Ten championship game will be it's either Ohio State, Michigan State, or Michigan, right? All those teams will at that point be pretty legitimate shots at the college football playoff, right? Just insane. What if the Big Ten champion? What if one of those teams loses the Big Ten championship? Are we really going to sit here and say that if Ohio State ends up with one loss and they lose in the Big Ten championship, that they're not better than Cincinnati still? Like, we're saying Alabama is still Alabama. Why aren't we saying Ohio State is still Ohio State? Because they lost to Oregon? Oregon's a better team than Texas A&M. This is where, like, I think a lot of people are like, right? Cincinnati, okay. I know they're undefeated, but when you actually look at the talent and the way they performed, and let's say Notre Dame loses again this season somehow to one of these just terrible teams they're playing at the end of the season, like Stanford, USC, like they should beat both of them. They lose. I know. I think there's a lot. We could get potentially, 3 2-loss teams in the college football playoff.
So, no, I see what you're saying, and I want to say something, and I hope this makes sense, right? I hope I'm kind of on track here.
Sure.
Now, here's how I'm kind of looking at Cincinnati and maybe comparing them to the rest. Like, let's take their records and their schedules out. What would happen if Alabama plays Cincinnati, in your opinion?
Not good. Alabama by a lot.
Okay. What would happen if Ohio State played Cincinnati?
A little bit less, but Ohio State by a lot.
Okay, so you're under the assumption that obviously Alabama and Ohio State, both of those teams would dominate Cincinnati more than likely. Okay, I was potentially looking for a Ohio State, maybe would have a little more trouble with Cincinnati than Alabama would. In that scenario, then I think Cincinnati gets a little bit more of an edge. But if you're under the assumption that Alabama and Ohio State are more closer together, then yeah, you're right. Cincinnati's probably going to get screwed, irregardless if Alabama and Ohio State get 2 losses.
I'll say this: Cincinnati better hope they're number 3, because if they play Georgia, there's no chance.
Yeah.
Georgia will just pound them. I mean, Georgia's killing everybody. I think Georgia's going to kill Alabama too in the SEC championship game, which would be
okay. Here it is.
Okay.
What if, right? So you think Cincinnati could potentially get to number 3 with other scenarios? I mean, we're going down.
The only way that would happen, Jared. The only way that would happen is if Oregon loses to Utah this weekend, or just loses in general to Utah, right? Because they'll play Utah in the Pac-12 championship game again. So this is not the only time they're playing. If they lose and then Ohio State or Michigan State, they end up with 2 losses. I mean, Michigan State will end up with 2 losses at that point. Actually, Michigan State might end up with only 1 loss this season. But if one of the Big Ten teams ends up with 2 losses, that's, I think, maybe where you see Cincinnati vault up to number 3. But if Alabama loses, maybe Cincinnati's number 2. But I guess that doesn't really matter, right? Same team.
I could see. Okay, so I'm going to piggyback off you for a minute, right? So Cincinnati, I think there's another way they can get to number 3. Oregon wins out, right? They beat Utah. They potentially beat Utah in the Pac-12 championship or wherever they play, and then either Georgia or Alabama loses. So one of them is going to fall, not necessarily out of the college football playoff, but they're going to fall from 1 to 2. So let's say one of those teams moves to 4. Right, you're then thinking that Ohio State has lost to either Michigan State or Michigan, or in the Big Ten championship. It's a lot to follow here. I'm trying to somehow get Cincinnati to number 3 and Oregon to number 2. I think that is Cincinnati's best hope.
Okay,
fighting chance
Here's
to
how
get
it
to the
happens.
championship game.
Here's how it happens. Okay, if Georgia is not going to go any lower than number 2 this season, I don't think you can ever put them any. So if Georgia loses,
even with a loss to Alabama in the SEC championship,
yeah, because it's only a one-loss team. You can't. That one-loss team is better than Oregon, and they're better than Cincinnati. So you have to put them.
So they can lose. What if Georgia gets blown out?
That's different. But that's not going to happen. Come on. That's okay.
Okay. We're throwing scenarios out there.
Here's the scenario, though. The scenario is Georgia wins the SEC championship game. Okay. So Alabama loses. Alabama, they vault to 4 or maybe out of the college football playoff. I don't know. Doesn't matter at this point for Cincinnati. And you're right. Oregon wins out. They end up 12-1, only lost to Stanford. And Cincinnati wins out. They end up third. It's very possible. It's actually pretty easy. I mean, it's like, but yeah, you're right. Then that means that Ohio State is losing to Michigan.
Would have to lose.
And then Michigan's losing in the Big Ten championship game too. So it's probably unlikely. But yeah, I mean, I could see Michigan losing to Minnesota in the Big Ten championship. I could see that happening.
Okay. No. Hold on. So I'm going to try to follow you here really quick, because I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole right now.
Sure.
So if Ohio State were to lose to Michigan State or Michigan, right? They're out. They're done. They're bye-bye. See you next year. Michigan, if they were to get into the Big Ten championship and they win, you think that Michigan jumps Cincinnati?
Yes. Because if you go through Ohio State and then you beat another ranked team in the Big Ten championship game, Cincinnati still they have one win against Notre Dame. You can't, just because they're undefeated does not mean that they are better. Their strength of schedule is better. Like, I get winning every game, but when half your games are against UAB, it's not, you can't do. So yeah, I think Cincinnati will be number 4 unless they get a lot of help. But I think Cincinnati will get in, and I hope to see it. And I kind of hope Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game so that Alabama plays Cincinnati and not Georgia, because at that point you're wasting one of the semifinal games between Georgia and Cincinnati. Maybe Alabama, with the way they played sometimes this season, like Cincinnati has a chance. Against Georgia, they just have no chance. That's just I think, and like I don't even think Alabama has a chance against Georgia. I think Georgia's the LSU. They're the Alabama of last year. I think they're just probably going to go on and win the national championship. But we'll see in the SEC championship. Jared, we need to get off this thing. We're rambling. We're going on.
My head's spinning.
But hey, guys, another football podcast again. Look for me tomorrow, Saturday. We are going to be talking, or I'm going to be filming stuff, posting stuff on the Cover 2 podcast, Twitter, on all our social media, all that stuff. You'll see it. Make sure to check out the podcast. This is not you can still see all the stuff Saturday and check out the podcast Sunday as well, because obviously we're talking a lot of NFL. So check it out. Obviously big games later on Sunday as well. My Cardinals playing the Seahawks. Jared's Cowboys playing at 1:30 as well. So if you're watching, check it out. If you don't like the 10 a.m. games, check out the podcast as well. So a little short-term promoting here, and a little shorter week for podcasting and to see our podcast and have it be relevant. But that's why we're providing the extra content this weekend for Harvard versus Yale. But like I said, I will be there. Hopefully my brother is suiting up. If not, there'll still be plenty of fun content of me drunk and all this other stuff this weekend, my family, all that stuff. And Jared, I'll maybe have you controlling the Twitter a little bit as far as tweeting about games.
Might need to take over. It just depends. I need to know how many drinks you've had. When you get to a certain level, then I'm taking over the reins. So you get control to a certain point.
Sure. That my first dumb tweet, and then you can lock me out of the account. That's fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey guys, it's been another fun podcast. We'll see you next week. We don't know when. Obviously, Thanksgiving week. What we might have a podcast, might not. We'll see how scheduling goes. Enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend if we don't have a podcast. But for this podcast, we're done. I am Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 podcast. See you guys.